Over the past year, we've generated thousands of revenues for our clients through our chat and voice AI systems for almost 20 different businesses, including a $250 million restaurant chain in North America and one of the world's largest travel agencies. And it's all done possible using Voiceflow. So here's the 5 things that I wish I knew before starting Voiceflow. Hi, my name is Chen, a Voiceflow certified expert, and I've spent over 1,000 hours building production-ready chat and voice AI agents inside Voiceflow. Not just demos, but a system that can handle hundreds of real customer messages and calls every single day. So in this video, I'll walk you through 5 tips that separate demo from real systems that you can actually run in your business. And if you stick around to the end, I'll show you how to get my free Voiceflow production checklist, a complete document that basically summarizes everything that I'm going to go over and a little bit more. And if you want my agency to implement something similar for your business, you can use the link in the description to book a free discovery call with me and my team. So let's get straight to it. Okay, so we're going to do 5 tips that I'm going to go over inside Voiceflow. And the first tip that I'm going to be talking about is something called the knowledge base. Now, if you've been building AI agents for a while, or if you're kind of roughly familiar how they work, basically you use something called the knowledge base in order to allow the AI agent to have access to your specific business information, whether it's an FAQ, whether it's a customer support document that your company has access to. Usually you would need to use something like a knowledge base in order for a chat AI agent or chatbot to answer customers' questions accurately, right? And the way you do that within Voiceflow usually is within the knowledge base. You can add data source. You can upload PDF, right? So if I just go browse and I go ahead and upload a normal PDF like a sample contract, let's say it's a legal contract chatbot for your internal legal team, let's say. And let's say this is an LLM chunking strategy, right? Which actually allows you to let a LLM, aka AI, to decide how you actually want to divide the documents into small pieces, into smaller chunks. So the AI, the chatbot, can only basically fetch the most relevant small pieces or chunk of information to answer the user's question, right? So you can, from Voiceflow, you can add smart chunking, which is break up your data into logical steps by topic, and at the same time, you can add FAQ optimization, which is basically mean that the AI itself will create some sample questions that each section could answer. This is basically for an FAQ situation. So like if a customer has a very specific question, like a customer support use cases, you would want to turn that on. You can have different settings as well, but I'm not going to go over them. That's not really the point. From here, you can add some sort of metadata. So that means it's basically telling, grouping the knowledge base into different sections. So for example, in this here, if I want to add a category and let's say, let's call this shuttle. For example, we have different legal contracts. We have a shuttle contract, we have a train contract, we have a bus contract, we have a taxi contract, etc. Right? So you get the point. So this is, for example, I can set the category to be shuttle, but I'm going to remove that for now. And normally this is how you can import and upload PDF into the Voiceflow knowledge base, right? So it's refreshing right now. Just wait till for it to basically finish uploading, as right now it's pausing. And now it's finished. If you click on it, you can see that there are 10 chunks being created, being uploaded to the knowledge base. And within each chunk, you can see the data. So you can see the smart chunking is true, right? Because we have set it up to be true. And we have the chunk ID, right? And normally within Voiceflow, you can set up a capture step, right? So if you go to listen, go and capture, you can go on and capture the entire user replies as the last utterance. So that means it's basically the user said something. It's going to go through a knowledge base search step, which if you go to the def, you go to KB search, then drag it on here. And then from here, you can search the query, which is the user's question. You can save the chunks, which you just saw, which are the pieces of PDF document that you've uploaded into the knowledge base, the chunks to the variable, called KB chunks. You can limit how many chunks you have, right? And after that, you will have a LM step, right? So you have the prompt step, drag it here. And from here, you can basically click on this pencil button, and I just have very simple prompt saying, respond to the user's questions based on the chunks that you got from the KB search, right? And I'm going to set GPT 4.1 to be the model, and it's going to return an answer, right? So if I just test this out right now, if I just click run, and I just say, so it's capturing my user's reply, and I'm going to be saying like, what is the shuttle contract about and then it's going to retrieve the chunks, and here's the answer to the questions based on the provided contract. So what is the contract rules for the consultant? So this is basically I'm basically giving a bunch of FAQs, right? So basically summarizing what the specific contract is, right, to the consultant, etc. So you can see that this is how generally a knowledge base works in Voiceflow. Now, the tip that I'm actually giving you right now is that there's actually a way to provide much more accurate answer, because right now you don't really know what chunks you've got, right? You just got KB chunks, and then you ask the question. There's not that many control over how you can search the knowledge base, right? And there's actually a way to do that. And a way to do that is if you go to the Voiceflow docs, the docs.voiceflow, and just go to this link, there's an API for this. It's called Query API. So this API endpoint allows you to query the Voiceflow knowledge base, which you have set up, and retrieve answers to your questions. The difference between using the built-in knowledge base search versus something like the Query API, by the way, API is basically, if you don't know, is a way to basically allows you to communicate between different software, essentially. This gives you a lot of control over how you can curate the knowledge base, therefore making your chatbot for a very specific use case much more accurate. And basically a lot of the production projects that I basically have done, a lot of the times it's the knowledge, this document is just not like a plain PDF. There's basically a use case where like there was basically almost 500 different electronic products, and each of them has a different model name. And for each model, there's basically a PDF of the user's manual that we have to upload to the knowledge base in order for the customer support chatbot to be able to answer the questions accurately, right? That's actually one of the projects that we've done. And we found that in general, using just the knowledge base search step is actually not that great because it doesn't give you much control. Because basically what happens is the model name is so like similar. For example, if I have, if I can maybe have a note over here, maybe I just copy this actually. And basically the model name can be like CME 3100, and then you can have a CME 2100, CMI 1800, for example. These are different models of like a electronic product name, and each of them have a PDF. So therefore, if we just plug everything into the knowledge base, there are going to be 500 documents of very similar model name. And the way that knowledge base works is searched by semantic, meaning that the users, what's the closest chunk of information that's most relevant to the user's question semantically. But that, just because it's semantically, doesn't mean that it's the most accurate answers, right? For example, if the user is asking a product about, for example, questions on the product CME 3100, it doesn't make any sense. In fact, it should always basically never retrieve chunks from the CME 2100 and CMI 1800, right? For example, you should never do that. So the way that we can actually query or set up the knowledge base a little bit better is one, using a metadata or the tag essentially in the older knowledge base API. Nowadays, Voiceflow no longer has the tag, but they use this metadata. But remember the metadata that I showed you when you set it up the PDF. This is actually how you can segregate different types of PDF that you have. So we can have a metadata called CME 3100 for the first model, CME 2100 for the second electronic product model, for example, right? And the way that we can query the knowledge base is actually through the API block. So if you look in the API, you can basically just copy this URL right over here. You just copy into here. You have the content type. You have the authorization, which is the Voiceflow API key, which you can find in the settings. And then from here onwards, you just basically copy this payload, this example payload that you've got from the docs into here. And you can see what settings they have. Chunk limit, again, basically you can control how many pieces of information or how many chunks that you're receiving. Synthesis force is very important. By default, this is actually true. If we turn it to be true, that means that when we run this knowledge-based query, the LLM is going to go ahead and gives a summary of the chunks that it's going to produce. So it runs for an LLM step. But most of the time, we want the most control over the response, and we actually want to turn it to be false because we just want this API step to return the raw chunks. And once we have the raw chunks, then do we only pass it to a final LLM step like this one to generate a response, right? We don't want to generate a response early. Within the settings, you can actually choose which model to use. Not too relevant because we've set synthesis to be false. With the temperature, you can have a system prompt if you want to turn synthesis to be true, right? And then you can ask the question, right? What's the contract date, for example, for the shuttle contract that we've got? And the beauty about why we want the knowledge API is you can see how much control we're already having, right? But at the same time, you can set filters of the metadata that you've set up. For example, if I type in filters, and then I have in curly brackets, I have category, and I set in shuttle. What that means is basically you're telling the Voiceflow knowledge-based API to only return chunks that include the metadata saying shuttle, right? So this is actually how we actually go around and solve this problem of basically having too many products within the product's knowledge base, and they're so similar to each other, is by basically querying, having a category of metadata uploaded to knowledge base. But when we query the knowledge base, we also include a filter to only include the category that the users have questions about. So if the user has question about CME 2100, the in should be CME 2100 here, right? So we've set it up dynamically so it would only filter a very specific set of information so it doesn't make up responses, for example. This is very important to know, right? So this is my first tip for you. My second tip for you is actually something much simpler. You might already know this, but you might not if you haven't used Voiceflow in a while. Basically, right now, Voiceflow started out as a chat agent, right? So if you click run, I'm able to talk to it like a chatbot, essentially, right? It's basically a chatbot. But Voiceflow, since earlier this year, actually has implemented a voice feature. So AKA is a platform that you can do both chatbot and voice agents at the same time. So the way you can do that is you go to interface and you go to modality and interface and you just click on voice. Now you can see that the widget has become how can I help you, start a call, and you can just click start a call and it will talk to it just like a voice bot, right? You can send it to, you can talk to it. So you say, hello, how are you doing?
Hi there, this is Laura from...
Yeah, right. So this is basically, you can talk to it. You can also send it to a phone number, and actually you can talk to the Voiceflow agent through a physical phone number, right? This is kind of a quick second tip that I just want to make sure that you guys are aware of, right? But let's change it back to the chatbot for now. For the third tip is for a situation where actually you have a website chatbot, right? So usually how Voiceflow is being marketed is that you have this chat widget on the bottom right, and then you just talk to it, right? Like a customer support chatbot on a website. But what if you want to build a conversational agent that doesn't use a website as the display, right? What if you want to talk to your AI agent in a custom mobile app that you've built on App Store, Google Play, or just a web app, an app that you've created, a custom app that's not a website chatbot, right? But you still want to talk to it. Or you want to have some sort of chat agent, chatbot functionality in your custom mobile app, right? Or you have some sort of essentially a different environment that's not a website in general, any environments that you can think of, but I still want to be able to talk to the AI agents that I've built in Voiceflow. How do I do that? Well, this can be done essentially through the Voiceflow Dialogue Management API. So I've gone to an NAN to try to simulate this environment. So just imagine now I'm in basically here, right? Just basically here, and I have a custom chat interface. Imagine this is a mobile app that I've built, for example, right? And for now, let me just click publish just to make sure everything is in production settings. But right now you can see that the start node is connected to this customer support agent that I've set up, right? So basically how the Voiceflow API works is that dialogue management API works is that you can basically call you basically have the user ID, right? Which you can find out if you go to the transcript. You can see the user ID here. So basically each time a different user talks to the chatbot, it will have a unique user ID to identify a specific user, right? So that's why we're here. We're basically specifying a specific user ID. We're calling this API link, general runtime voiceflow.com state/user interact endpoint. We have the authorization, which is the Voiceflow API key, which you can find in the settings. We have the version ID, this should be production, right? You can be development or production. We're saying it accepts content type of application JSON. And we're sending this payload. Basically, this is a type launch. If we run this, basically, first of all, it's the first step to launch this Voiceflow session, right? This is an initiation step. After you've initiated it, then you can start conversing with it. And the way you do that is actually exactly very, very similar. This is the same endpoint, the same interact endpoint with the unique user ID, with the same authorization, version ID, and the content type. But here, we're requesting a type text, right? So I'm sending a message to the Voiceflow in the backend, even though I'm not talking to it through the chat widget on the website, right? And I'm sending a payload here, which is basically what I'm going to be typing in this custom chat interface that I've set up. So if I say, hi, right? So this will basically becomes, this here will basically becomes hi, right? And we're sending a request to the Voiceflow server in the backend in order to get a response back. This is how you can query or talk to the Voiceflow agent without using this predefined chat widget for that. So let me actually test it out, right? So I'm just saying, hi. So it's running through the API and it's going to be responding to chat, right? So you say, hello, thanks for calling admin support. How can I help you today? Are you experiencing any issues with the product or do you have any questions, right? So you can keep talking that way, just like how you would talk to it in this chat widget, right? So just like how you would talk to this chat widget, but we now have a very custom front end, basically, that you can call. And you can see that from here, the request was essentially, you can see that the request was basically hi, right? So if you scroll here, maybe you can't see the full thing, but yeah, you can see that the scroll here and said payload hi, right? So this is how you can actually talk to Voiceflow agent using a custom front end. Now, the fourth tip that I want to go through is basically something called custom actions. And to explain that, I need to explain a little bit more about software engineering. Now, this might get a little bit too technical. And if you're basically a business owner or you're not too technical on this, don't worry too much. The whole idea basically is to have some sort of things that you can, more custom things that you can define on your website. For example, being able to have a contact form that the user or the leads can fill in the form directly inside this chatbot window, essentially. That's how you can set it up using custom action. That's one of the application of it. But if you're slightly more technical, if you're a product or a technical team and looking to implement something like this, what you can do is use something called custom actions. And the way that a custom action works is as follows. So this is what we call a sequence diagram for those who don't know. So this is basically a very specific software engineering term. Basically, you just read this diagram from bottom to, from top to bottom, right? So this is basically saying the different requests and different sequences in which the user communicate to a specific software. In this case, this diagram is basically explaining how the user can talk to the Voiceflow server, right? So if I say the user, for example, have a request, say they want to talk to a human in the loop situation, you can basically send a Voiceflow request, and a Voiceflow request is what we call an action, right? So normally if I say hi to Voiceflow chatbot, we're sending an action of type text, right? And the content of the text, which is known as the payload, means talk to a human. And the Voiceflow server receives that request. The Voiceflow chatbot or the LLM is going to process the request and it's going to give a response back to the client. So the client is like the middleman between the user and the Voiceflow server, right? And the response being given by the Voiceflow server / the LLM AI agent is called a trace. A response is called a trace. Again, it has a type called dial. Payload, again, the content of the trace is this number. Basically, the user said, I want to talk to a human. The Voiceflow server is going to return a phone number, right, to the client. And the client, which is the middleman, automatically knows to call that number, right? So it's going to send another request back to the Voiceflow server when it's been called successfully. And you can see that the action, the request, is of type call success, right? And finally, afterward, it's going to generate a response, right? Which is, again, a response is a trace of type speak. The payload is have a great day, and it's going to output the word have a great day back to the user, right? This is the sequence diagram of Voiceflow, essentially. So why am I talking all about this? Remember, an action is basically a request that you're requesting from the user to the Voiceflow server, right? So a custom action is something that you can set up, well, a custom way that is not kind of generally supported as a template within Voiceflow. For example, text obviously is going to be a supported template inside Voiceflow because it's just a message. But something like a form, for example, is not generically templated support by the Voiceflow. So what you can do, basically, what we've done is actually I built a website using Cursor. If you don't know, to build a website, you will need to use something called an HTML code in order to build a website. So you can define the fonts, the words, etc. But this is not too important. The important part is within here, within a script, I can actually define something called form extension. And I'm going to call it the name of the form. And I'm going to basically create a trace. And I'm going to define the trace type. Again, the trace is the output from the Voiceflow server back to the user. To be of custom form, this is important. And name itself is also called custom form. And now I basically have a bunch of code here to define how the form is going to look like, right, on the website, right? And this is nothing to worry about, but the important thing is I define the form in this HTML code, right? It's called custom form. Now, what's important is if you go back to the website, go back to the Voiceflow, I can basically, within the chat widget, right, as you see here, please enter your name and email in this form. I have a message. And then I have a custom action block that I can drag from dev to custom action. And you can actually have the custom action name. But the custom action name, remember, has to match exactly as how you define in the HTML in the website, right? So I need to be, because I defined the trace type to be custom form, therefore, within the custom action block in Voiceflow, it has to match exactly called custom form. And I have a path called response submitted, right? So if the response is submitted, it will go to the next step. And I've turned on stop on action. So basically, if this is checked, so the AI will actually stop the conversation on this block, aka the AI will stop the conversation on this form until the user has finished the form and click on submit, essentially. And it was stuck on this stop, essentially. And this is actually how you can set up a custom form and actually collect users' information, right? And the way you do that, by the way, is to set up a chat widget on the website, is if you go to Google Chrome, you go back to the interface, and all you have to do is copy this code, right? This code, and you paste it into the website backend in the HTML. If you have a web developer, literally all you have to do is copy this code and tell your web developer, they would know what to do, essentially. And yeah, this is, but the only thing that's different from this code that you have and the one that on the website is you need to add like basically a system field that's called extension form extension. The reason why, because this doesn't exist in a normal Voiceflow project, right? This only exists after we define form extension as a variable, as variable inside this HTML code, right? So that's why we need to add extension, form extension. So when we render it on the website, this form will appear, basically. So again, if I get too technical, don't worry too much about it. The essence of it is basically if I kind of just start new chat. Oh, I might have to publish it first. Sorry, actually, I need to publish it. So yeah, I need to publish it. So I need to start a new chat because I need to refresh. Start a new chat. Yes, exactly. So I'm going to put in Tom Smith 123@gmail.com. I'm going to put in a random number 123. Your name is Tom Smith, right? So it knows because basically we enter this form, and then within this step, I'm basically letting Voiceflow know the name is defined as last. Don't worry about the code. Like, just basically copy this if you're not too sure what you're doing, like with the code. This is just basically how we let Voiceflow knows the variable, like collect the variable that the user just typed within this form, right? And it will say the user is Tom Smith, right? So this is the Voiceflow, which is custom action, allows you to do many interesting extensions, for example, within a website. For example, you can dynamically also render certain carousels or different cards, and you can display those images within the chat widget to the user to show them in a more user-friendly vanilla environment, basically. So yeah, this is the fourth tip. The fifth tip is actually quite easy. It's actually what we call chat persistence. And I want to go through that is because through many of our projects, it's actually a recurring theme that happened to many of our clients, is that when we have this window, basically, when we have this code being this widget, this code being installed on the website, you will have the chat widget basically installed on the website, right? But basically, a lot of the time, the client wants to control whether the users can return to an ongoing conversations or start fresh when they reload the page. So right now, if I go to this website and I reload the page, right, I have to start a new chat, right? So I have to start a new chat, like basically, right? So a lot of the times, like you have a choice of letting the user, should they basically, if they close the tab, basically, or open the tab or come back later, if they open the website, I do something else, I come back to the website, should they still be accessing the same conversational thread, same conversations that they were having 2 hours ago? Basically, that's what chat persistence is going to answer. And in order to configure it properly, inside this code that you've set up within the script, essentially, you need to just basically add another field, essentially. And the field basically is just called persistence, right? And I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to go back to cursor. And I'm going to do this, right? So persistent local storage. So there are 3 different options. Local storage, which is the default options, means that conversations actually persist across page reloads and browser sessions. So it's useful for returning users. So if this is basically what this is right now, right? If I go back, so let me just start a new chat. And then if I refresh this page, I'm still in the exact situation. So if I go like maybe like Edwin, and then if I refresh it, actually, that doesn't work because it's a custom form, sorry. But basically, you will still be at this custom action stage. It won't just completely refresh the conversation, right? Because basically, we've set the chat persistence to be local storage, right? But if you want, you can change it to section storage, meaning that the conversation persists across page reloads in a single browser session, but they reset when the tabs are closed. That means that if I close this tab and I go back to the website, I won't be able to see the same progress that I've made when I'm talking to this agent. I will need to start the conversation again, fresh, right? You can have this option. And the last option is memory, meaning that the conversations reset on every page load or new tab, right? So it's for private sessions. So if you want some privacy and you basically want more security to it, or you can set this option so that when you refresh it, it's gonna basically start fresh from scratch, essentially. So you have all 3 options, and you can set that quite easily within these parameters right here in this assistant in the widget code. So yeah, hopefully I've given you 5 tips that are quite useful to know when you're building production-ready AI agents for your business, whether it's chatbot, whether it's voice agents, or for your specific custom applications, for example. Now you have gained some tips I've learned quite a hard way, basically, throughout this entire year when I first started using Voiceflow, all the way back in January. So yeah, hopefully you've learned so much. And if you're a business owner and you want to basically implement a production-ready chat or voice agents, you can use the link in the description to book a free discovery call for me and my team. And if you want basically a summary of what I've described so far, you can click the kit link in the description to actually access the whole PDF guide of what I've discussed just now. And yeah, if you enjoyed this kind of content, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.